right now, General Clark admits to imperialism. So this is a story that, of course, isn't new to a lot of people. In fact, one of the people who commented, I think Joe OWS, commented earlier that this came out in the early 2000s as to General Wesley Clark admitting basically to U.S. imperialism. And I was going through TikTok and I saw this video, but it is spliced with some other images as well, which I think adds more impact to what Wesley Clark is saying. So I wanted to show that as well and talk about it, because I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of people don't realize is that we have been lied to into wars, right? Over and over and over and over and over again. Why do we keep believing the narrative that, oh, well, this person abroad is doing all of these horrible things, so we got to go there and save their democracy, or we have to fight for their people, or this person is a dictator? When in reality, the United States is the one that's doing all the things that it accuses other governments of doing. There's a lot of projection that goes on in front of our face, and that's partially by means of the corporate media that is in our faces day in and day out. And a lot of victims of this particularly are people who are especially older. Those of us who may be boomers, silent generation, even some Gen X, and some of us millennial who grew up watching this along with our parents who may be boomers or Gen X. A lot of us are also watching this as well. And then we were subject to this brainwashing, this programming, this propaganda. And then we started to believe it. My fellow millennials, how many of you, when 9/11 happened, you got the itch to join the military because you felt, man, this is terrible. The world is coming after us because they do not like us because of our freedoms. We got to protect this homeland. And then you went, or you wanted to go, but then once you got out there, you saw what it was really about. On my channel yesterday, I had on Kit Cabello from Heartlands Media on my channel. He's a veteran. And he saw what is going on out there. And this is why he's now anti-war. Because he saw how the sausage was made. And so I'm going to be sharing with you guys a general talking about how the sausage is made. And a lot of times people will deny that, well, it's, you know, for the greater good. No, it is not. Let's get into it. So I do want to apologize for this being a little bit smaller because it's on TikTok, but this will still make a great impact. Let me share my screen. All right, so let's go. I make sure I start starting position, and let's listen.
Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz, I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition. It is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force for months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When the Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext. I think that's the only word for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today, we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by 1. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somalian organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region. It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
My war crime footage.
Oh, boy. Well, what do you think? There was an admission by this general that we were going to conduct these military operations in these countries, and it was basically alluding to terrorism. That's a very general statement, right? Terrorism. Terrorism gets committed by many different groups for many different types of beliefs. They get committed. I've seen Christian terrorists. Anybody remember the Oklahoma City bombing? The Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist group. They have been terrorizing especially Black people since the Jim Crow era. But when they talk about terrorism, they talk about people in mostly Muslim countries. But what do a lot of these countries have in common? Oh, yeah, they're rich in resources. That was the common denominator. It was, well, these countries just so happen to have a lot of oil. They have a lot of resources. Let's go to these countries and let's extract these resources. And we'll just say it's because of terrorism. And we'll blame it on their religion. So what if a few people who are Muslim get vilified in this country? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? And here's the crazy part. There's a lot of people who are in the chat that know about this video, who've seen this interview, this discourse with General Wesley Clark. But the crazy part is I've never seen this discourse from General Wesley Clark. So I know if I haven't seen it, I know a lot of you haven't seen it. And I know there's a lot of people that haven't seen it. And we went to war in countries not to retaliate. 9/11 was an excuse. Even if it was done legitimately by a bunch of terrorists, number one, most of them were Saudi. So why aren't we going after Saudi Arabia? Oh, right. There's a good relationship with them because they have oil. They have resources. The United States doesn't want to get rid of that. Well, somebody could say, well, why don't we just get rid of our dependence on oil so then we can actually put sanctions, divest, and boycott BDS on Saudi Arabia? Why not? Just move ourselves off of oil, move ourselves into a more green economy, and then we won't have dependence on oil anymore. And then we can say to Saudi Arabia, all right, you guys did some unjust things. You guys were also one of the main influencers of 9/11. All right, time for you guys to face justice. But they don't do that. Why? Well, there's a little thing that we have in our country called money in politics. And the people who own these fossil fuel industries also own our politicians and government. So in order to keep the money rolling in, they're not going to have to hurt their relations with Saudi Arabia. They don't want to do that. So they leave Saudi Arabia alone. Saudi Arabia can murder American journalists and still get away with murder. Remember what they did to Jamal Khashoggi? They did that. And it wasn't just a murder. It was a brutal murder. They chopped his body up. Yet, does anything happen to Saudi Arabia? No. They commit atrocities against queer people like me. And yet, you have our government giving them weapons in order to commit a genocide in Yemen. And this isn't just limited to Republicans. This is also Democrats. In fact, it was famously shown that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, was sitting with President Trump as he was talking about their deal and giving them weapons. President Trump was there, and he even showed pictures. Look, this is what we're giving her, these big, beautiful weapons. We got to give them these big, beautiful weapons, and I think it's going to be a great deal for the United States of America in our partnership with Saudi Arabia. And so that's what they did. But it wasn't just limited to Trump. Biden also did the same thing. So if you look at the Democrats and Republicans, you actually see that they do the exact same things for the exact same people. If I'm against a company, why would I go with one employee versus the other employee of the same company? This is the Democrats and Republicans. Remember, the war started under Bush. 2 wars. Obama expanded it to 7. And now we're in a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine. And make no mistake about this. This proxy war was never about the people in Ukraine. The United States does not give a crap about Ukrainian citizens. If they did, then they would be pushing for a peace deal, but they don't. Why? Why do you think there was a push to have wars in 7 countries? Resources. Dun, 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 dun. Resources. Guess what? What do you think Russia has? You guessed it. Resources. You don't think the United States and these corporate oligarchs who basically own the country aren't pushing the United States government to do this proxy war in order to get the resources, at least to have a puppet dictator in Russia? Their problem isn't that Russia is capitalist. Their problem is that Putin isn't an obedient boy. They're fine with him being a capitalist. They're fine with him being an anti-communist. They just want him to. They just want him to be obedient to them. But remember, Russia got nukes. Russia is a nuclear power, so they can't push Russia around like they do all the other states. They can't do it. So because of that, this is why the proxy war is going on right now. Because they use the power of NATO to push against the border, thus threatening Russia. This is, look, history may not repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes. I'm going to tell you right now, why did the Cuban Missile Crisis happen in the first place? It happened because Russia felt threatened. Why? Because the United States literally have missiles on the border of Turkey. So Russia was like, okay, well, if they got their weapons pointed at us, we got to respond by putting our weapons at them. The United States has always been the aggressor. And people sitting here go, oh, well, they're coming after us because of our freedoms. No, because you're pointing a gun at them. And they didn't do nothing to y'all. And that's the reason why people vehemently detest this country, because it's always messing with other people. Who is the bully? The bully is the one that's always messing with people, even though they didn't mess with them. They're always going after people for their lunch money. The United States went after Chile for their lunch money. The United States trying to go after Venezuela for their lunch money. The United States went after Iran for their lunch money. The United States has went against Indonesia for their lunch money. They're going after Somalia for their lunch money. They're going after Iraq for their lunch money. They already beat up the hell out of Libya for their lunch money. So you don't think they're trying to go after one of the big kids on the block now? The only difference is one of the big kids on the block got some muscle. And he's like, nah. But the United States, instead of going toe-to-toe with that big kid, they're going to one of their little buddies. Hey, go and fight them, and we'll back you up. But guess what? A lot of people don't tell you this, but that little, how can I say this? That little crony of the United States, yeah, they're having a tough time. And so what's going on right now, the United States is using that in order to make more money for the military industrial complex. Look, baby, it's all a money game. That's all it is. It's been a money game ever since the inception of this country. It was a money game. When they destroyed and killed and committed genocide against all the indigenous peoples, it was a money game. So they can take the land, develop it, and create more profit. When they brought my ancestors over here from Africa in order to work the land through slavery, through chattel slavery, it's all a money game. It's because they didn't want to pay nobody to actually do the work. They just wanted some free labor. So they stole us from Africa and brought us over here. It's all a money game. Some of them got pissed off because we no longer were under chattel slavery in a general sense. We're still under some sort of chattel slavery, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, it's all a money game. It has not changed in a fundamental way. It just shifted a little bit. There is a video of, and it's a lot longer, with General Wesley Clark. I'm going to link it in the chat. And a lot of people are wondering why BRICS exists. Because the United States has been bullying people for so long that now they got to come together just so that they can keep themselves protected. The world is literally committing self-defense from the United States. That's the crazy part. And then the United States wants to get mad for people wanting to defend themselves. They're pissed off because I won't take because I'm taking their lunch money. You think?